En Truus was er altijd verbolgen over dat het postkantoor in de kranten wel aandacht kreeg, in de Utrechtse kranten, de landelijke kranten. En het Rietveld Schreuderhuis eigenlijk alleen maar aandacht in avantgardistische Russische literatuur en zo. Wordt zij natuurlijk geïnterviewd, want zij was natuurlijk, zoals we weten, heel lang de minnares van Gerrit Rietveld. Daar is eigenlijk niks schokkends mee, toch, bij jullie? Dat weten jullie wel.
On a sunny morning in September 1943, a young woman walked calmly down the Malibaan in Utrecht. Her red-painted nails stood out against the dark fabric of her coat. Hidden beneath that coat was a pistol and a plan. Truus van Lier, just 22 years old, was about to carry out one of the most daring acts of resistance in the Netherlands during World War II, the assassination of Gerard Curlin, a notorious NSB police chief. To the outside world, she looked like an ordinary student. But behind her composed appearance was a fierce commitment to justice and defiance. Truus wasn't just resisting an occupying force. She was challenging a system of fear, cruelty, and betrayal. Her story is not only one of courage, but of conviction, sacrifice, and the unbreakable spirit of resistance. Geertruida Truus van Lier was born on April 22, 1921, in Utrecht, the Netherlands. Raised in a liberal and socially conscious family, she grew up with a strong sense of justice. Her father was a lawyer, and the family environment encouraged open discussion, critical thinking, and moral responsibility, values that would deeply influence her later actions. Truus attended secondary school in Utrecht, where she stood out for her intelligence, independence, and bold personality. Friends described her as sharp, witty, and unwavering in her opinions. She wasn't afraid to challenge authority or stand up for what she believed in. In 1940, after the German invasion of the Netherlands, she began studying law at Utrecht University. Like many Dutch students, she was faced with the harsh reality of Nazi occupation, which increasingly crept into academic and social life. As the Nazis imposed more restrictions on Jews and dissenters, Truus watched with growing anger. Her university became a place of silent resistance, with many students and professors quietly opposing the regime. Truus, however, found silence impossible. She joined the Utrecht Student Corps, an organization that, while not openly rebellious at first, harbored many young people who would go on to resist the Nazis in secret. She also became involved in a women's rowing club, where political ideas were often exchanged in whispers between training sessions. Here, she connected with like-minded peers and began to form the networks that would later support her in the resistance. By 1941, her studies were no longer her primary focus. The war, the injustice, and the collaboration she saw around her demanded action. For Truus van Lier, words and ideals were not enough. She was preparing to fight back. Truus van Lier's shift from university student to resistance fighter was gradual, but driven by an intense moral urgency. As the Nazi grip on the Netherlands tightened, she could no longer stand by and watch. By 1942, Truus was actively seeking ways to resist, not just in thought, but in action. She started by joining a resistance group connected to Utrecht's intellectual and student circles. These early efforts focused on gathering intelligence, distributing anti-Nazi pamphlets, and aiding Jews in going into hiding. One of her first concrete roles was serving as a courier. Using her appearance as a respectable young woman, she moved undetected through the city, transporting documents, messages, and occasionally weapons between resistance members. Truus also helped organize escape routes for Jewish families and provided support to those already in hiding. Her apartment became a temporary refuge and meeting place, a dangerous choice, as being caught aiding Jews meant certain death. But fear did not dictate her decisions. Instead, she became bolder, more committed. She carried out her missions with nerve and precision, often cycling through the city with false identification and contraband hidden in her coat or bag. She developed a calm under pressure that stunned even the most seasoned resistance members. Her ability to blend in, to move through Nazi checkpoints without raising suspicion, made her invaluable. By 1943, Truus was one of the few women involved in high-risk operations, and her confidence only grew. She began discussing more direct forms of resistance: sabotage, assassination. These were controversial topics, even within resistance circles. Some feared retaliation or doubted the moral justification. But for Truus, there was no moral dilemma. To her, the Nazi regime, and those who collaborated with it, forfeited any claim to mercy. That same year, she became involved in planning the execution of Gerard Kurlan, the NSB-aligned police chief responsible for the arrests and deportations of many Jews and resistance members. It was a watershed moment, transitioning from aiding the resistance to directly striking at its enemies. In her final months of freedom, Truus moved through Utrecht like a shadow, quiet, deliberate, deadly. Her resistance was not just political, it was personal. Every act was fueled by outrage, loyalty, and a profound sense of justice. She believed in freedom, not as an abstract idea, but as something worth risking, and ultimately giving her life for. On September 3, 1943, Utrecht held its breath. In the early afternoon, Gerard Kurlan, the chief of police and an active collaborator with the Nazi regime, was shot at point-blank range on the Malibahn, the city's most prestigious avenue, now infamously lined with SS offices. The assassin? A 22-year-old woman in civilian clothes who disappeared into the crowd before anyone could stop her. That woman was Truus van Lier. Kurlan had become a symbol of terror in Utrecht. Under his leadership, Jewish citizens were hunted down, resistance members arrested, and families torn apart. Truus had followed his movements for weeks, meticulously planning the perfect moment. Her decision wasn't made lightly. Assassinating a high-ranking collaborator would almost certainly invite brutal retaliation. But Truus believed in the power of symbolic resistance. Killing Kurlan wasn't just eliminating one man, it was striking at the heart of Dutch collaboration with the Nazis. She didn't work alone. Truus had contacts who provided her with a small pistol, a hiding place, and intel on Kurlan's routines. On the day of the assassination, she followed him discreetly as he left his office, just past the busy intersection of the Malibahn and Noordboomenlaan. Truus approached him from behind and fired a single shot to the back of his head. Kurlan collapsed instantly. Truus walked away, calm and composed, and disappeared into a nearby park. By the time Nazi police flooded the area, she was gone. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The Nazis launched mass raids across Utrecht, arresting students, professors, and suspected resistance members. Reprisal executions followed. The attack sent a shockwave through both the resistance and the occupying forces. Many in the resistance feared such direct action would endanger their networks. Others hailed Truus as a heroine, someone who had finally acted when others only spoke. For Truus, there was no turning back. She went into hiding, changing locations frequently, aided by her network. But the hunt was intense. German intelligence had received tips from informants, and betrayal was always a risk. Within weeks, she was tracked down and arrested by the Gestapo. Truus never confessed to the assassination. During interrogations, she refused to give up the names of her comrades. She remained defiant until the end, a young woman who had taken justice into her own hands and paid the ultimate price. The assassination of Gerard Kurlan remains one of the boldest acts of resistance carried out by a Dutch civilian during World War II. It demonstrated the raw courage of individuals like Truus, people willing to act, to risk everything for a future they might never see. For weeks after the assassination of Gerard Kurlan, Truus van Lier lived in the shadows. Her photo had not been circulated. Her name wasn't known. Yet. But the Nazis were furious, and their net was tightening. The Malibahn killing had humiliated them. A young woman had executed a top collaborator in broad daylight and vanished without a trace. They launched a brutal wave of reprisals. Dozens of students and suspected resistance members were detained. Torture was widespread. The Gestapo interrogated anyone remotely connected to Utrecht's underground movement. Truus knew she was in danger. She moved frequently between safe houses, sometimes hiding in attics or farmhouses on the outskirts of the city. Despite the risk, she continued to carry out small missions, delivering documents, helping others find hiding places, maintaining contact with allies. Her resolve never wavered. She was fully aware of what might come, but fear did not govern her. As she once told a friend in private, "I'd rather die standing than live on my knees." But in late September 1943, someone betrayed her. The details remain unclear, whether it was a paid informant or someone who cracked under pressure, but the Gestapo received a tip. They raided a location where Truus was supposed to meet a fellow resistance member. She was captured. At first, her captors didn't realize who they had. Truus gave a false name and refused to answer questions. But evidence slowly mounted. Witnesses placed a woman matching her description near the scene of the assassination. Eventually, under pressure and through interrogation, the Nazis connected the dots. Truus van Lier was identified as the assassin. She was sent to the infamous Kamp Sachsenhausen for initial detention and questioning. There, prisoners were often tortured, subjected to psychological torment, and held in isolation. But Truus remained silent. She never gave up her contacts or revealed any names, not even under extreme duress. Later, she was deported to Sachsenhausen concentration camp in Germany, a site notorious for its brutality. As a political prisoner, Truus was considered highly dangerous. Her execution was scheduled quietly. No trial, no public announcement. Just another silent killing in a place designed to erase people from history. On October 27, 1943, Truus van Lier was executed by gunshot in Sachsenhausen. She was 22 years old. No family member was notified. No body was returned. For years, her fate remained uncertain. Rumors of her death circulated among resistance circles, but official confirmation only came after the war ended. Her parents received the devastating news after the liberation of the Netherlands. Even in death, the Nazis tried to bury her memory, but they failed. Truus's execution was not the end of her story. Instead, it became the turning point, a moment that crystallized her legacy as one of the few women in the Dutch resistance who took direct action against the occupiers and paid with her life. Her courage, silence under torture, and unwavering loyalty made her a legend, not just for what she did, but for how she lived and how she faced death. In the decades after World War II, the name Truus van Lier slowly emerged from the silence the Nazis had tried to impose. Her story, once whispered in the shadows, became a symbol of resistance, courage, and sacrifice. In her hometown of Utrecht, Truus is honored in multiple ways. A bronze memorial bust now stands near the Maliebaan, the very street where she carried out her most daring act. Her likeness is calm but resolute, a reminder that resistance didn't always wear a uniform or carry a rifle. Sometimes, it looked like a young woman with red nails and steady hands. Each year, on the day of her assassination of Kurlan, or around Liberation Day, daffodils are planted and ceremonies held in her memory. A school in Utrecht also bears her name, ensuring that new generations learn not just of war, but of bravery, born from moral conviction. Her legacy lives on in books, documentaries, and exhibitions across the Netherlands. One biography, Truus van Lier, Ian Daad voor de Vrijheid, recounts her life in detail, offering insights into her world and the impossible choices she faced. Unlike many resistance fighters who worked in anonymity, Truus's story became emblematic of women's direct action during the occupation, rare but unforgettable. More than 80 years later, Truus van Lier remains a potent figure. She reminds us that history is shaped not only by generals and armies, but also by individuals who stand up when it matters most. Her act of defiance was not just against an enemy, it was a call to conscience. She didn't live to see freedom, but she helped carve the path toward it. After the war, the Netherlands began to rebuild, but not all stories made it into textbooks. Truus's memory was preserved quietly at first, through friends, local tributes, and a growing understanding that the resistance was bigger and more complex than many had thought. In 1981, her city gave her a face again. A bronze bust was placed on the Maliban, near the spot where she fired the fatal shot. School children walk past it today. Some pause, some ask who she was. Her name also lives on in a school named after her, and in biographies that tell her story in full. Not just the dramatic moment with the pistol, but the lonely days in hiding, the loyalty, the silence under interrogation. Her story reminds us that bravery doesn't always look the way we expect. It doesn't wear medals or stand on stages. Sometimes it's a quiet voice in a noisy world. Sometimes it's a calm walk on a dangerous street. Truus van Lier didn't survive the war, but her choice, to act when it mattered most, became a part of something much larger. Her memory continues to shape how we understand courage, resistance, and the cost of freedom. She was one among many, but she made sure her moment counted.